What if AI doesn't just replace workers, but deletes or rewrites the job description entirely? Our next guest thinks that's exactly where we're headed, toward a world where skills are like APIs. They plug into work and jobs become something we used to have. Joining Greg on the stage is Ravin Jesuthasan, a senior partner and global leader for transformation services at Mercer. If you don't know Mercer, it's the 80-year-old consulting force that's been redesigning labor markets since before AI had a name. So, Greg, you're back up.
Good to see you again.
Likewise, Greg. It's lovely to be here with you, and thank you, Maxwell, for that introduction.
So listen, I'm gonna warn you. I'm gonna put you on the spot because there's a lot of theory, and what I want to get us to is the advice, the insights, and the learnings. You've been at this a while. You personally, you've been thinking about it, writing about it, and working with clients on the challenges of transforming organizations, other transformations, and now with AI. And I'll also say that at Section, we like to go high-low, Ravin. We like to zoom out and talk about, sort of more strategic implications, and then get pretty low, like hands-on, roll up your sleeves, what's actually happening sort of on the ground. Let's go high to start, though. So enterprise AI looks like it's stalling or struggling in most cases. I'm sure for lots of reasons, one of which is the data is not in good shape and people are trying to build applications and redesign their workflows on top of data that may not be ready for it. I think another reason is workforce anxiety and sort of uncertainty around what's going to happen. That's where I want us to focus first. Do you agree that anxiety and sort of uncertainty at the human level is an issue right now, is a challenge? And if so, what should leaders be doing about that? And how should leaders talk to their teams about this coming transformation? Let's be specific here.
Yeah. So I certainly agree that there is anxiety, but I actually think there is a more fundamental issue, Greg. In Davos this year, 2 years after all the excitement around Gen AI, right, coming out of ChatGPT, there was a lot of introspection and a lot of soul searching around. We see the potential, we see the promises of productivity in isolated use cases. Why have we not been able to realize a return? Why have we not been able to sort of scale this up? And for the first time, there was this recognition that, we've in many respects been taking this the wrong way, right? And we do this with technology all the time. We try to shoehorn it into the organization. And instead of, and I use this phrase that seemed to resonate, instead of starting with a tech forwards approach, what if we started work backwards? What if we started by clearly articulating what's the work that exists today, the work that's coming? What is the specific role of technology and AI, not just Gen AI, but the entire tech stack? Where does it substitute? Where does it augment? Where does it create and transform? And not just the impact of AI, because what we've seen, and I'll share some links in the chat in a second so people can see some of the case studies, but it also, the presence of AI creates opportunities for you to tap into alternative ways of organizing talent. It could be the employee who's doing the work. It could be your global capability center. It could be a gig worker, because in the way AI sort of shifts the premiums on work, it allows you to tap into those other opportunities. And then it gives you this opportunity at the end to reconstruct a new and a fundamental different calculus for work. But to your point around the anxiety, I think a big part of it is when you shoehorn the tech in, many organizations, as we know, tend to do it top down, right? As opposed to if you start with the work, it's the perfect starting point for getting the workforce actually involved in solving the problem.
Sure, Ravin. I sometimes think that AI is going to be the truth serum for companies, meaning it will expose poor organizations in terms of design or poor process or poor management sort of techniques or poor growth mindset or lack of growth mindset. Would you agree?
100%, Greg. It becomes a salve, if you will, for many sort of really poor leaders, because in the back of their minds, not to be too cynical about this, but I think in the back of many poor leaders' minds is the workforce is noise to be turned down, and perhaps AI is that volume knob that I've been missing.
So this would imply that well-run companies who have well-defined business process, well-defined culture, and a culture that accepts change are going to actually leverage AI better than the rest of us.
Absolutely.
Well-run companies will actually accelerate even further ahead from their competitors if they get this right. But you're also describing a process which is start from the work and kind of work backwards. That seems hard. Like, I mean, just as you were talking about it, like doesn't sound like most leaders want to do that kind of work, or most people want to do that kind of work. So let's go low now. How do we actually do
Yeah.
that? Like, do I do that for my team? Do I hire someone to do it for my team? Like, what does it really mean to work backwards and figure out how work gets done, in a 100-person team?
Sure. So I got 6 books on this, Greg. And like I said, I'll put some resources in the chat. It's actually pretty straightforward, but you would expect me to say that. It's really starting with deconstructing the job or the process, right? So Maxwell's point was a really good one. When you deconstruct the job into the elemental tasks, it becomes really much clearer as to where the technology is going to substitute the work that someone's doing, the repetitive rules-based stuff. Where is it going to augment human creativity, ingenuity, critical thinking? And where does the presence of the technology actually create demand for new work and new skills? And the beauty of this approach is you start to see very clearly what skills I don't need, what skills I need more of, and what skills are changing in application. So it's actually a pretty straightforward step. And then as you figure out how do I redeploy the work, what you'll find is you go through this process of questioning.
Hold on a sec. You're going too fast. Let's stay with the first part, because most people
Okay.
aren't like. I want to get. Let's be specific here. Who does this work? Let's assume I'm the CMO of a 100-person marketing organization, and I'm nodding my head. I get it. AI. I'm in a language intensive function. I'm the head of marketing, right? AI is going to clearly transform marketing. I get all that. I've had a couple scattered pilots. They haven't worked out. Maybe my social media person's using AI to write blog posts better. Like, who gives a shit, right? But I'm hearing what you're saying. I need to sort of understand all my workflows and understand the opportunities, right? Where I won't need people, where I will, whatever. But who does that? Do I go, and don't say hire Mercer, but like who for a 100-person CMO, or for a president of a 30-person company, who should they go get to do this? Or can someone internally do it?
Yeah, someone internally can do it. And I honestly think it needs to be an organizational capability, but every manager needs to be broken from the traditional muscle he or she has of, when I see work, I think I'm going to go open a rec.
Right.
To actually saying, I'm going to start with redesigning the work. That's my core capability. Because where we've seen organizations do this well, and I've worked with a number where they've actually made this is how you as a manager operate. And I've got one client who actually rather draconianly said, if you don't operate in this way and we don't see evidence of it, there's no bonus next year.
So hold on a second. When we say it, again, I'm getting specific here. You're saying we should be teaching managers essentially how to do workflow audits or some version of that. That's what
work design, basically.
Work design. That should
be three steps.
Right. That should be a management core competency going forward. And we should be teaching managers it, because they're going to always be needing that skill, because they're always going to be basically looking at how work gets done in their teams and redesigning, if you will, their teams or their workflows kind of forever. Right. This is the future.
Exactly.
Okay. What are the 3 steps?
And the 3 steps are deconstructing the job or the process, analyzing the redeployment options. Where does AI substitute, augment, transform? Where can I tap into a gig worker? Because I've now pulled the workflow apart and it's actually more efficient, effective for me to actually use a gig worker. Where can I move work to an agile talent pool? Those options become a lot more visible when you've deconstructed and looked at these redeployment options. And then it's reconstructing a new and much more effective operating model. The other benefit of doing this.
Hold on. Does that include also where I can deploy an agent? You talked about a flexible gig worker, a full-time. Presumably that includes an agent or some sort of AI.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. And it's the entire sort of set of tech options, all the way from your intelligent automation to Gen AI tools that are going to augment some folks, to agents, which are going to substitute large chunks of workflows. The other benefit here, Greg, is this lets us do something that I think is in desperate need of every organization, which is to collapse the run transform cycle. We don't have the luxury of doing transformation like we did 10 years ago. where I could reset the operating model once every 7 years, fire a bunch of people over here with legacy skills, and somehow find all these new skills that I need. If you can teach managers to do this, what we've seen with organizations who do it well is they're perpetually reinventing work. You don't have to do the big reset and take a restructuring cost and all of that, because you're continuously relevant.
Right. So you're saying this is the new individual muscle, managerial muscle, and organizational muscle, and it's just basically, I mean, it's continuous. We used to call it, continuous improvement. This is continuous transformation or continuous workflow redesign. It's basically what you're suggesting, right? We should be doing this all the time. So what do leaders say? Because when employees hear that, I think they hear you're coming for my job, right? If a leader says, "Oh, let's do some workflow redesigns or some workflow audits," and that sure they can sit. I think the employee hears something else. So when you counsel CEOs and leaders, what do you tell them to say?
So I tell them a number of things. You've got to do three things with your workforce. You've got to involve them early on. So because no one knows the work better than the people who are doing it, despite what every CEO might think. And so getting them involved early, because as we know, the variance with which work is done, particularly the bigger the company gets, explodes exponentially. So the person doing the work is critical. So you've got to get her involved. You have to give that person an incentive to participate, right? They've got to have a reason to make a difference. And you have to give them the space and the safe zones to be able to land elsewhere within the company. Either an opportunity to take on more work, an opportunity to sort of pivot where they're going. I've dropped in, by the way, 4 links into the chat, including 2 which are excerpts from my last 2 books. My last book, Greg, was predicated. It's work that my co-author, who is the chief strategy officer at Standard Chartered Bank, 175-year-old bank, and they were reinventing. And the thing that was their trigger was, unlike every other transformation they had done, we showed their board that they could save, UK-based bank, so in pounds, £50,000 per employee by reskilling talent from the sunset roles to the sunrise roles. That completely changed the calculus of how the board had thought about transformations and managing change completely. Because if you've got good people you've invested in for 20 years, they know how to get stuff done in your culture. They know your systems. They've got their networks, etc. They are going to get productive far more quickly if you can teach them a few technical skills, rather than that great hire externally who's got the technical skills, but it's going to take 2 years to get productive in your environment.
Yeah, Ravin, I just want for everybody on Zoom, and there's close to 4,000 of us, I wanted to sort of plus one what you've been saying and also acknowledge the realities of it. And I'll use Section as our case study, because we're a small company. We'd be a small team inside of a large organization. It's about 30 of us. We're an AI company. That's all we think and do all day long. Yet we didn't have time to do what you suggested. And so we've had to hire workflow audit consultants. Basically, we've brought in 2 or 3 people, one for marketing and sales, one for engineering, one for ops, to basically help us do the work you're describing. Because we're busy, and everybody just felt like, listen, we're making good progress, but we can make even faster progress in terms of doing this for ourselves. So I think it's fair to acknowledge, if you get some help if you need it. And it doesn't have to be, we're not spending a lot of money on this. We're spending a few $1,000s, right, with these consultants, but just someone to kickstart us and observe our workflows, interview us, kind of basically document how we get stuff done inside of a little section, right? So we can take that, frankly, automation and that assistance from AI even further. We all use AI every day, but we just saw there was more potential to free up more time and sort of redeploy the human capital we have. So, let's talk a little bit more about leaders, though, because it feels like they're focused on what I call the cut phase, which is the efficiency phase. And, and that's how AI is going to pay for itself. Do you buy that is that the current ROI mechanism for AI? Or are you trying to get the people you advise to really think about creation of new products, new revenue, kind of growth? Is it both? Are they at the same time? Is one first? Just walk me through that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Greg. And there has been far too much focus on efficiency. And I think it's an outgrowth of this. If I lead with the tech, then I'm going to substitute the employee doing the work with this great new piece of toolkit, right? As opposed to where we've seen companies do it well, I think they get this multiplier effect of, yes, you get some efficiency, you also get a lot more productivity and agility. And that's where, those of you who are in the chat, you'll see an article that I had published in the Sloan Management Review, where we, as we went through the process that I've just described, freed up close to 45% of the labor capacity in a 4,000 person organization, 5,000 person organization. And the thing that we did, Greg, that I think was really impactful was the beauty of this process is it gives, right? And in this instance, the CEO had three choices. It was like, I can take some of this, you can take this as margin, you can take this as an opportunity to radically transform your customer service levels and actually go from being at the 10th percentile of your industry, something closer to the 5th percentile, maybe even the 75th, by improving your customer service at levels, which would increase your retention and your share of wallet. And or you could actually make up for a shitty work experience where your turnover rates are 70%. How about actually getting it down to something reasonable like 35%? And to his credit, he took all three of those, right? It was, yeah, I'll take a little bit of each. Yeah, I got some margin because I've got shareholders, but I can really move the top line by changing my service levels and introducing new products. And when I redesign work, that third step of reconstructing work, instead of redesigning work so 100% of every waking minute is focused on execution, I'm going to redesign it to 93%. So that 7% is where I've designed in space for learning and well-being into the flow of work. And that's where I think that AI dividend gets shared much more equitably.
That seems like a good CEO, and not to be too cynical as well, but I think a lot might take more of the margin, but I think it's a great way to think about it. So you said 45% sort of essentially freed up. How long did that take? And again, let's bring it down to, I run a 100-person team.
Yeah.
What's your expectation if I go all in on this, do my workflow audits, deploy my AIs, support the organization, my team to adopt the AI, and so they're not scared about getting laid off in a month? What could I expect do you think in a year? Is that 10, 20, 30%? What's that? What's going to be opened up? Just give us a range.
Yeah, so I've seen for organizations within a year get to 40%. Relative.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
Oh, it's a lot. Oh, it absolutely is. But what we've seen, Greg, and this is a really important point, is there is a ton of inefficiency baked into your average job. The amount of wasted effort, the amount of stuff that people do that where the technology could substitute and augment is absolutely where the release is. So you initially get a really massive release in terms of, and I see the question, 40% of what? It's a productivity gain. So 40% more productivity. There is this massive release of productivity early on. Now, once managers settle into this routine of reinventing, right, then the gains are smaller. Mm-hmm. But I guarantee you they're not the 3% that people get from usual cost-cutting effect of doing that most companies engage in every year.
So why the hell is enterprise AI stalling? Like what's in the way? Like why aren't others getting at least 20, let alone 40? I think 40 is amazing. 40 is crazy. That's a lot. Like, how about 20 across a 100-person team? That's 20 people. That's a lot of new resources that are available to do other work. Yeah. So
I think 90% of companies, Greg, have approached Gen AI deploy. I picked Gen AI because it's been such a groundbreaker, right? It overcame so many of the legacy challenges we had with technology in terms of putting it in everyone's hands. Anyone who had a cell phone or a PC. The problem was, what did most companies do? They basically bought a bunch of licenses and threw it out like candy, right? And spray and pray never works. We've seen that in other areas. But that's what they did. They sprayed Gen AI around and prayed that miraculously, if you and I were doing the same job, that we would both apply Gen AI to the same effect. And the likelihood is you're incredibly progressive, you're using it, and you freed up 40% of your time. Ravin's kicking back saying, shoot, I'm just going to start with the white blank sheet of paper like I did every other day for the last 35 years. And that's really where the big miss was. Yes, you want to educate people on what the technology could do, absolutely. But merely democratizing access and praying that there's going to be a lift. And it's why we see so many organizations, that I mentioned being in Davos. In that same session, I asked the 20 CEOs who were in the room, how many of you have continued your Gen AI licenses from pick your vendor of choice, right? That you signed up to 18 to 24 months ago? 2 hands went up. Because the others had actually started to either scale back or completely shrunk the number of people who had access to it, because they limited it to the functions where they were seeing ROI, where you had a business leader who'd gone and she had redesigned the work around the text capability. And I think that's the challenge that we've had, because so much money's been thrown after it, the fear that I don't want to throw good money after bad.
So is that the advice you'd give an executive, maybe someone that's already kind of struggled, which is, would it either be serious about the org-wide deployment and like get your shit together, or would it be, okay, let's scale back and get a win in one part of the org, marketing or sales or whatever it might be? Like, what would your advice be, or is it just too context specific to be able to generalize?
I think it's a little context specific, but I suspect if you've rolled out your platform of choice and it's been 2 years and you haven't really gotten a return, the pressure to reduce those licenses and get some savings, I think is going to be really high. So I'd say it's both, right? Let's shrink the number of licenses down, but let's pick 2 or 3 use cases in areas where you've got leaders who are willing to do the redesign. And let's show the wins that then justify us renewing licenses and scaling it across the organization.
Okay. Ravin, I interviewed this guy, Zach Cass. He used to be an OpenAI executive, and he made this comment that I thought was really smart, and I'd like to get your reaction to it, which is that in the short term, meaning the next year or two, what's happening is a lot of employees are getting the productivity gain, but the organization isn't yet. Meaning, the employees are being good at using AI and buying themselves time and being more productive, but that's not yet kind of flowing through to the manager or the boss kind of thing. But the employee's getting a chance to go walk the dog or take another yoga class. I'm just curious if that's does that make sense to you?
It kind of does, but I'll go back to my example, Greg, of if you're that employee, yeah, you're the one walking the dog. But Ravin's still, with his blank sheet of paper, as unproductive as ever, right? And I think this is where we need to shift from democratization to intentional redesign of work so that all of the jobs are completely redesigned. The job description reads with, you start with our large language model or small language model. This is how you do the work, as opposed to leaving it to the individual devices of every single person to figure out.
Okay, so I'm going to give you 2 choices. You might be picking a third, though, which is really interesting. I always thought about this as 2 choices, which is you could deploy the LLM. You're right, your AI of choice to the organization. Do a good job of the upskilling, the change management, and all that. So don't just throw it out there and pray for the best, but deploy it effectively and drive adoption. That's choice 1. Choice 2 is do that or don't do that, but do something else, which is go into targeted workflows and basically redesign them with AI. Essentially, don't give everybody AI. Find the places where you think you're going to get the highest ROI. Maybe build an AI application. That's harder, it gets more expensive, but it might be worth it. So I've always thought about those as 2 choices, and you could do both at once. You could sequence them. Do you agree, or is there a third choice? And maybe that third choice is what you're saying, which is do that workflow audit and sort of understanding of all the tasks that actually comprise a role, and then deploy the LLM. I don't know. Is that what
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, in that piece that I wrote, and people have access to it, I think starting with the work lets you be a lot more targeted with your tech investment. It also, I think, allows you to sometimes to get a lot more leverage from the legacy aspects of your tech stack, your RPA implementations, some of your machine learning capabilities, because you get to integrate them into a broader tech solution that's actually solving some specific problems. And you might find you don't need an LLM, but you need a couple of bespoke small language models, right? For maybe the legal function, or perhaps for, for your contact center, et cetera.
Is one of the challenges here, Ravin, as we start to wrap up, that the head of AI or the person spearheading AI is a technologist in many cases? They're a CTO, a VP Eng, head of IT, and they're buying the software, they're buying the AI, and sort of, I think, kind of throwing it out there. Is that an issue? And is your point of view that the head of AI should not be a technologist and should be a business person or someone who understands people and organizations? Because this is more of a change management challenge and a tech challenge, or like, how would you think about who leads this effort inside of not just a big company, even a small organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think these tech decisions really need to be a group decision. I think you need someone from operations, you need someone who understands the people side of things, and you need the tech person. And I think that's one of the challenges, is that it's too often this is an HR thing, so the CHRO makes the decision. This is a tech thing, so the CTO makes the decision, when it's all actually a work thing. And I think that's the key thing. It's like it has to be about how do we change the work that exists today, or the work that's to come as our business changes and as AI creates more opportunities for us.
It sounds like you're suggesting we don't need a head of Gen AI or head of AI. We should have someone with a title like head of reinvented work or something. I mean, that's what I'm hearing, really, is what you're saying. This is not about the tech.
Well, and the tech person reporting into that person.
Right.
That
Right.
would be my ideal scenario, right? Where the tech person is there, but they're reporting into someone who is responsible for the work of the organization.
So, Ravin, you basically want to be above all the tech guys. You just been reading about these $100 million pay packages for AI researchers, and you want to be above that. I get it. I want that too. Why did I get a liberal arts degree? Ravin, one last piece of advice, please, for everybody here. Think about them as they're leading a team, probably 10 to 100 people, and they've been asked by the CEO to be the tip of the spear. They've been asked to lead their organization, their team, it will lead this transformation. I mean, likely they're the head of marketing, and again, head of sales, maybe head of engineering, those language intensive functions. What's a couple final pieces of advice for that leader?
I think it's really understand the work that is going on in your organization and what more work you could do. Understand where the specific technology can substitute, augment, or transform, and then get the voice of your people in redesigning the work, because the gains you're going to see are exponential.
So you have I'm going to end with one last question then, Maxwell, we're almost done. So you have no concern today that the business case is not compelling. Your point of view is, if this is done well, there's clear and significant ROI here for, I would assume, almost every organization.
100%, Greg. I've done this. I've deployed various platforms at close to 40 organizations over the last number of years. In my fourth book, we had 135 case studies in reinventing jobs that I wrote with John Boudreau. And we consistently saw not just your 3 to 5% gains, but 20 to 60% in some instances.
Okay, I want to end there. Thank you, Ravin. Great to see you again.
Thanks, Brett. Likewise.